to Charmed Life, a radio show discussing spirituality, magic, and the unconditional love of the universe. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm your host, Tricia Carr. Thank you for joining me today. I am so pleased to be with you to discuss a topic that is very important to me. It is actually central to, I would say it's central to my mission or my life purpose. And so I hope that you all will open your hearts and join me in it. And please understand that I am coming from a space of heart and love and to the point and interest of unity and ascension. Before I get into my topic, by the way, it's just me today. I hope you don't mind. It's a little date. You and I are having a date. Well, Jarvis is here too, so I guess it's at least a threesome. Jarvis Essex, my producer, always making it look gorgeous. And if you want to see what it looks like, if you're one who listens, you can check it out on my YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/Tricia Carr. And if you're one who watches, you can find it as a podcast and you can listen to it in your car, which you actually, I guess you could do that on YouTube as well. I do that a lot. I listen to a lot of YouTube videos while I'm driving. But you can find the podcast by searching on any podcast outlet. Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. We are on iTunes, we are on iHeartRadio, and also, what's the other? Spotify, that's right. Thank you. Love you, Spotify. Sorry, I forgot about you. All right. I also want to tell you about, I want to tell you about the fact that I've just started a community on Patreon. Ooh, I'm so excited. I teased it a couple of times. I was about to do it, but I'm really excited to actually welcome people to Patreon. The way you can find me is patreon.com/Tricia Carr. And it's a way for you to be able to not only support this show, Charmed Life, but also to engage more personally if that's your interest, because I want to engage personally with you. I have some really cool programs set up there, different ways that you can support, and we will do a meeting every month if you support at a particular level, and a meeting on Zoom so we actually see our faces and connect that way. And then I'm also doing some group meditations and MP3 giveaways of produced meditations at certain levels of patronage. And also, if you're just interested in doing a class or a service at all, I recommend go check out. There are levels that offer you a discount on my services. And so then you could get the discount before you book to work with me. So just go check it out. Again, it's patreon.com/Tricia Carr. I'm very excited about it. It feels like it is a more engaged way to connect than even like Facebook or Facebook groups. But I do have a Facebook group, and I am there live every week offering advice, lessons, spirit messaging, and readings for free. So go check that out. Facebook.com/CharmedLifeLove. Actually, sorry, Facebook.com/groups/CharmedLifeLove. A couple other things. I am actually teaching an intuitive and mediumship development class today. You could actually sign up still. It's at 2 p.m. my time, 2 p.m. Pacific. So that is about 3 hours from now if you're watching the show, a couple hours after the show ends. And so you could go sign up. You just need to go find it on my Facebook page or my Facebook group. You could find it there. And just look for it. It's a pinned post. If you look up facebook.com/Tricia Carr Charm or join my group, and you'll be able to find it and sign up. And I'm going to be doing a class on Zoom video conference, and then we will be doing practice readings together. Yeah, it's for beginners and intermediate, so I hope you might check that out. I'm going to be doing this every other week, it looks like, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Finally, I have registration open for the Empowered Empath and Highly Sensitive Intuitive, TriciaCarrCharm.com/empath. Go check that out. We start mid-May. All right. Thank you for indulging me in that. And now to this topic that I said is very close to my heart. This is about the sentience of animals and nature and the entire earth plane. I had an episode not too long ago, a few months back, called Animal Emotions, because I observe certain public figures and even spiritual teachers saying that animals and or nature are lacking in sentience, consciousness, or in the case of that other episode, I was talking about emotional makeup. And this is something I've also addressed when I talk about animism. In that episode, I also talked about animism, which is what is referred to as a belief that everything in nature is conscious. I didn't actually understand, I didn't realize that that was set aside as a particular belief, because to me, it's just always been reality. And so what I want to talk about is, yes, the sentience of animals and nature, but I also am going to talk about the cause of veganism, vegan with a capital V, not just a personal dietary regimen, but the set of beliefs and activism behind veganism, and how I have observed that it is at times becoming dogmatic in a way that is limiting, and that they're actually harming the progress of their own cause. And I also want to address how we can actually consume energy, that is what eating is, that is clean and is oriented to helping us to ascend. Additionally, I'm going to talk a bit about how we can further the cause of helping people to understand how to treat animals and nature with more unity consciousness. And I'll just, a little spoiler alert, that isn't by creating blame, shame, and separation. And so this is all that I'm going to talk about today, and it's actually probably going to be a 2-part episode. But again, I want you to know that even though I'm calling out a particular cause, like veganism, I'm coming from a place of wanting to champion their hearts. I want to, if you're vegan and this is a cause that is very important to you, I want to say thank you for that. And I'm not saying that I don't align with you. I don't call myself vegan. It's interesting. My friend Patrick Hayes just said this recently on a video that I'm going to reference here. Not because of how my diet is composed, but because I want to keep myself free to be able to move with whatever spirit and my own inner being is leading me toward. And so if I align myself with a particular label or a particular movement, then I could be limiting myself to the collective thought of that movement. And that's actually, you'll hear me sometimes talk about being an empath, but I actually like to call it an empathic function, because I want to be free of whatever collective ideas and energy are associated with a particular label, if that makes some sense. Labels are only helpful if they're helpful. Labels are tools. And if we allow them to use us, then we are being limited, and we are not being oriented to our personal sovereignty and the creator essence or the God essence. So I'll just dive right in. One of the things that actually inspired me to begin this discussion is that I heard a very famous, now past, teacher and author, Dolores Cannon. I heard a quote. I heard her say, it's in a particular video, and now I may be slightly paraphrasing because, but I think I've got it pretty close to exactly how she said it. She says that if humans want to ascend, that they need to stop consuming the suffering of sentient beings. So I'm going to say it again. If humans want to ascend, they need to stop consuming the suffering of sentient beings. And I agree. But what we need to look at is actually how she said it is, the suffering of sentient beings. It is consuming the suffering. That is the truth of that statement. One thing that I want to isolate also is the sentient beings part of that expression. Now, I understand, I heard that Dolores Cannon is vegetarian. I've seen that, or I've heard her say that before. Sorry, because she's now no longer she's no longer in the body, so she's not eating vegetables anymore. Quite frankly, but I want to talk about sentience as it concerns animals and as it actually concerns plants as well, because I think that this is actually, regardless of what you choose to have in your diet, it is really important to look at with our full consciousness. And I'll start by saying all creatures are sentient. The reason I'm highlighting this is because I recently also heard another spiritual teacher who's very popular on YouTube at least, or she's popular on the internet. I'm not going to identify her because I don't want it to seem like I'm actually calling this person out. Dolores, on the other hand, was very public. It was very much a part of her message. And I think that if Dolores were here in the body, she'd sit down with me and say, let's talk about that. Whereas with this person, I'm not certain, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm actually calling this person out as incorrect and criticizing. And I'll pause for a moment to just say that as it concerns Dolores Cannon or any other teacher, that just because they have one isolated phrase or belief or bit of teaching that doesn't resonate with me, that doesn't mean that the entire work of the teacher doesn't resonate with me. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because two things. First of all, perhaps that bit of information that teacher is putting forward is something that I will resonate with later. So perhaps it is me who is growing into the message of that teacher. Or perhaps that teacher is growing. Perhaps the message that teacher has brought through in that isolated area is being filtered in a way that isn't quite developed. And again, it has to do with our relationship, and I want to point us all back to our personal sovereignty. Now, at the same time, there are certain teachers whose message fundamentally is so not aligned with me that I do throw out all of that baby and that bathwater. That's true, because it isn't helpful to me. It isn't aligned with me. But so far as me isolating one phrase or one statement from a teacher like Dolores Cannon or this other person, this isn't meant to say that the entire body of their work is something that either A, I don't resonate with, or that I'm criticizing. I don't mean to criticize at all in this particular topic. But I will say now what that teacher said that is sort of central to this concern of mine. And I'll only, just for the sake of a speech, say that it was a woman. And she said, she referred to fireflies, or lightning bugs, as we call them in Texas, fireflies as being non-sentient beings. Non-sentient creatures, I think, is how she actually said it. And I think that this can actually be a bit dangerous to think of particular animals, and I'm going to get into plants as well, being non-sentient. And so to look at what sentience is, because this is also a fundamental tenet of, at least, I don't know if it's the entire vegan movement, but certainly a lot of people that I have heard speak on behalf of the vegan movement, they draw a line as it concerns sentience. And it's really important to understand the suffering orientation of consumption. I will start with that. And to recognize that the reason that it hurts us more with certain animals or certain kinds of expressions of nature, it hurts us more to consume them because they are more alike to us. And I'll explain that. So yes, it can hurt our hearts. The reason it hurts more is because if you were to either be inflicting suffering or condoning suffering for something that is more similar to you, this is a very natural biological response. That would hurt you more. So if you were engaging, if you understood that, for example, how terribly commercial chicken raising is, or just industrialized meat raising, how heinous that is, how much suffering that is creating, and then you consumed it, this would be more harmful to your being. And Spirit actually gave me a really great metaphor of why this is and why it's okay for that to be a more sensitive issue for us than, say, if we kill a bug or if we harvest a plant. The reason it's okay is, the metaphor I'm going to give to you is this. It's heinous to abuse children, right? Absolutely heinous. It is inhuman. It's unethical. Whatever plane of perspective you want to look at, that's unethical, right? It's a very harmful thing for obviously the child, but for the human condition. However, when a person abuses their own child, the child that came from their body, the one that is closer to them, there is a greater dissonance to actually inflicting that abuse than it is to inflicting abuse on a child that is not your own child, right? There's something more that there's more dissociation, there's more psychopathy involved in abusing your own child. You see, that's normal. It's just not abusing your own child doesn't mean, hooray, you are now an avatar. No, obviously. Not abusing another child who isn't your own, just abstaining from that also doesn't mean that you've reached very much enlightenment. It just basically, we're getting closer and closer to what I would call the creator energy or manifestation plane, where we're actually engaging in life force. And so you see how it is very natural, very normal, and not something that we have to be ashamed of or confused by, that it may be more difficult for us to consume or be sensitive to how animals like mammals are treated as opposed to other forms of nature. But see, these are just the smallest steps. One, like I say, is not in creator energy merely by abstaining from abusing one's own biological family or something that is biologically similar to them, but it is something to hold space for and be okay with the fact that that is more sensitized. Creator energy is engaged when we deepen our awareness to the knowing that all are family, all. I have another horrible example, and that is from this documentary that I saw. I'm sorry. I'm like, I have a horrible example. It's like, does this taste bad, Jarvis? Yeah, it tastes like shit. You want to taste this? Does this taste like shit to you? Sorry, got to lighten it up a little bit. But I did see a documentary a while ago about the results of the Chernobyl bomb. That was just a terrible thing. It was like an atomic bomb, and the biological results of that, there were many, many children who were born who were deeply deformed. And there were so many of them, and there were no parents. Many were orphaned because of people dying. And in this documentary, there was this nurse who was overseeing all of these children who were desperately deformed, and they couldn't care for them. And we know that if children aren't nurtured, that they cease, they just perish. Besides the fact that these children were really malformed, there just weren't enough adults to take care of these children. And the way that they looked seemed to make them less similar. And I think that the children actually started to lose some of what would make them able to connect with the adult. And the adult had to start to desensitize to that as well. And so there was the woman who was taking the documentarian, was there at this hospital or this orphanage, and a nurse picked up a child by its malformed limb and just kind of like moved it over like it was a book, or, like it didn't have any feeling. And the documentarian said, "Oh my God, that is a child. You're hurting that child." And the nurse looked at her and said, "It doesn't have any feelings." That is a terrible situation to be in. But you see, we could be doing that if we consider other parts of our family as non-sentient. And the family I'm referring to are, yes, other animals, but I'm going to bring into it other parts of nature. And it's something we can heal from. Long story short, I will just say that, including that nurse who was in the horrible situation where she didn't recognize that was a child, that was a baby. There's this prominent international group of cognitive neuroscientists and other experts, and this was actually endorsed by Stephen Hawking, and they affirmed that all non-human animals, including octopuses and anything else you could think of, are sentient and feel emotions such as fear and happiness. And so this brings me to how sentience is determined. I hope you guys are with me. This is going to be a two-parter. And if it feels uncomfortable, just know that that's actually us moving through some of this that is repressed, that is asking for our attention, actually. So I have to say that how sentience is determined, let's say by humans or by science, or just whether they're scientists or not, it's by using basically a human analytical process to make this grand determination. This thing has sentience, or this thing is more or less conscious. And by that I mean that we use like the limited physical perceivers, like our physical senses, to decide what is sentient. And I have to say that I think that this is quite narcissistic, even, to determine that just because some other collection of energy, such as an animal or a plant, to decide that it is non-sentient because it doesn't have a certain kind of behavior that is similar to our own. Again, we're just using like limited perceivers to assess that, when we know that our physical senses as a human don't even take in as much information as, let's say, a dog or a cat. That they actually see and hear more of light frequencies and sound frequencies than we hear. So even if we're using only our physical perceivers, that is really limiting. And if we can't perceive as much as other beings, then we aren't even the ones who we don't have rank. Quite frankly, we should ask the cats to tell us who is sentient or not, because they can see more of what's going on and they could hear more of what's going on. I actually read on a website, Psychology Today, I was reading an article, and the person who wrote this article, by the way, I'm going to be citing all of these sources in the article that I'm writing about this, so stay tuned for that. I'll point you to that if you're interested in doing your own research, but I'm not going to belabor you with that during the audio and the video version of this. But the person who wrote this article, who was a biologist, said that we only call something sentient if it responds to us. And this confused me deeply, because plants respond to us. Do they not? Of course they do. Insects respond to us. And even if this biologist eventually said that an insect is sentient, they specifically did say that they cringe when they hear someone say that a tree is sentient. A tree responds to us. How is that not obvious? That's empirical. So having said that, I will mention that these are some of the criteria that are used to determine if something is sentient. And that is behavior, evolutionary considerations, and one that is commonly used in the vegan, capital V, movement, physiology, and the presence of a centralized nervous system. See, this is central to certain vegans, if not all. I can't say that every single person who aligns with that movement agrees with this, but they determine what is sentient or what is included in their diet by whether or not they have a centralized nervous system, or better said, whether or not the being or the consciousness experiences pain. And so I'm just going to take a moment to look at that only, because there are actually things that we can perceive scientifically that tell us that this alone, that this is a criteria that would include animals and plants, even ones that don't have a centralized nervous system, because there are other organizations in these consciousnesses, in these creatures, I'll just call them all creatures, that actually point to the fact that they are responding to pain. And they're called nociceptors or nociception. And this is a nociceptor produces and regulates certain chemicals that in many cases act as analgesics. And so an analgesic is going to respond to a pain sensor, a pain stimulus. Additionally, there's something called intercellular receptors, microtubules, and other sophisticated intercellular systems that actually facilitate a degree of spatiotemporal consciousness. So these are in plants. This is in plants. We can observe this. So this is something that I want to help you who favor an analytical understanding into something, which I do as well, in addition to the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual. But there are actually ways that we can perceive that plants and animals of all kind respond in this way to pain sensing or to their environment. And this response would also indicate a certain kind of behavior and certainly sentience and consciousness. There is also how trees communicate, and it's called a mycelial internet, basically, a mycelial way. It's a fungus called mycelium that actually communicates with the roots of the tree across expansive distances. And this communication, it actually will tell, one tree can tell other trees that to send nutrients, to limit the nutrients in one area that has an abundance and send it to another area where it is needed. So this is response, and this is communication. This is behavior, and this is feeling. This is sensing. So now to the point of how I would say the vegan dogma and the reaction is actually harming their own movement, that their response is misaligned. And before I say that, I want to point out that it has to do with the heart and being able to communicate to one another from the heart center. If you have a cause that is really important to you and you feel deeply about it, and as my friend Patrick Hayes said in his video, which I recommend you go and check out, his is called Vegan Fundamentalism and something or other, and he says that when you are using an argument that, I'm paraphrasing, and I'm mixing in my own perspective, using an argument that is actually separation-oriented, this is my perspective, that it is because you are not, Patrick's perspective, you haven't fully integrated your cause. Because if you fully integrated your cause, then the only thing that is important is that the cause gets communicated. And you see, no one's heart was ever changed by being called a murderer. Not even a murderer. I mean, one who murders other humans. Spirit actually gave me a really good example of something that has been confusing me since I was actually a child. And I grew up in Texas, and, you know, it's more conservative politically and socially, I guess you would say, in Texas. And so, and also at the time period that I was young, the abortion issue is red hot. It still is red hot, right? But even as a child, I remember being 11 years old and being confused by how the two sides communicated with one another. And again, this has nothing to do with my personal or political stance about abortion. So we have the people who are pro-life, and they say, you're murdering babies. And that's their argument. The people who are pro-choice say, you want to control my body. And that's their argument to those. Now, see, that is a useless argument on either side because they aren't recognizing the understanding or the perception of the other person. So the pro-choice people do not believe that what they're doing, that abortion actually or terminating a pregnancy is murder. They see it a completely different way. And the people who are pro-lifers deeply believe that it is murder. They deeply believe that after conception, that if you cease that life, that it is actually murder and that it is a homicide, or I guess infanticide, or whatever you want to call it. So you see, ignoring the base of their beliefs and not having any compassion for it on either side is actually keeping them from doing anything that will actually make this connect hearts and minds about this. And this goes for the pro-choicers saying, you want to control my body. Well, the pro-lifers say, I don't give a good crap damn about your body because you're murdering babies. You know what I mean? Like they are having they're not communicating at all. And again, I'm using inflammatory language from either side, not because I align with either opinion. Just know that. I'm just being objective about it, and I'm trying to say it doesn't work. Compassion is the only thing that works. It's the only thing that actually changes a heart, is to connect to the heart and have compassion for their perspective. And so when a vegan says meat is murder, and when a vegan says you nasty meat eater, which was literally said to a friend of mine who hadn't actually put forth what her diet was at all. She was actually persecuted for something that a conversation she wasn't even engaged in. When a vegan does that, or when someone whose intention is to defend animals, beautiful intention, flawed logic. Beautiful intention, inappropriate execution, because you are not trying to change a heart. And so I want to say that a vegan who says that, actually, I want to extend compassion to your heart, because I understand your frustration. and I understand the pain and suffering that you're observing. But there's a way to actually deepen your consciousness about it rather than react from a place of pain, shame, blame, and suffering. I actually have to pause for a moment to say that I get persecuted when someone observes my diet, and it has to do with actually like with grains. I'm actually grain intolerant, and because people are, I don't know, for whatever reason, decided to be very judgmental about that. By the way, I actually think that there is a really insidious programming going on about why people are reacting that way. But, you know, I've been sitting at dinner and someone say, actually, my friend was ordering for me once, and she said, we're going to get all of this, but she can't eat gluten. And it's, by the way, it's not just gluten. I can't eat any grain. She can't eat gluten. And the person who was sitting next to us at the bar, who was just a stranger, he said, do you have, by the way, he was drunk. He said, do you have celiacs? And I don't. But that doesn't mean that I don't have the responses that I genuinely have, which are private, by the way. The responses that I have, it's none of your business that I'm lying on my couch in the fetal position for 3 days if I have this included in my diet. And I said no, and he said, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. I've told this story to drivers before, and it's kind of insane that he thinks that he has more information about how I should conduct my health than I do. By the way, he thinks that he has more information about how I should conduct my health than my gastroenterologist does too, because my gastroenterologist hasn't told me that I just need to abstain in order for me to not put myself in the situation of becoming precancerous of something in my digestive system because of the abuse. I've also had a server, when I asked if the butternut squash soup was homemade in-house, yes, it was. Then can you tell me if it has cornstarch in it? Because that also is really dangerous for my system. And he rolled his eyes at me, walked away, came back, and told me that it did not have cornstarch in it. I probably should have taken the eye roll as a cue to just go ahead and abstain from the soup, but I didn't, and I ate it, and I became violently ill for 3 days. So persecuting someone for their diet on any level is really dangerous. And it's to me akin to persecuting someone for how they conduct themselves in the bedroom. It's deeply personal. It is a choice that they have to make from their own sovereignty. And I actually I was in meditation, and I was communing with my guides, and I was asking about my diet. And I was saying, is this system or this belief, is that the way that I should conduct my diet? And my wonderful spirit guide said to me, that isn't how nature works. Nature doesn't look outside of itself to understand how it should best consume energy for its own wellness. Nature feels into itself, and it aligns from its own sovereign space what it should be consuming. And when I say that means the body, it means the mind, it means the spirit. And so if it hurts your heart to consume anything, if it hurts your emotions to consume any particular thing of any part of nature, then you shouldn't consume it. Not right now. It does call for you to deepen your awareness about what's happening there, though. If it is hurting your heart, it wants more attention and it wants more awareness. See, the thing about what I've recognized about when a person says you're a nasty meat eater or meat is murder, this response is not exactly, as my friend Patrick would say it's not totally incorporated in the cause, but it's not really aligned appropriately, because it seems more like akin to someone who is in the scenario of, let's say, an assailant. This is a metaphor. An assailant holding someone hostage, someone that they love hostage. And because the reason in that particular scenario, it would be effective to take out the single assailant in order to grab your loved one. That would be an effective measure to take. But when we're talking about the whole of many people and industry creating suffering, just attacking an individual is not an effective way. loving and having compassion for an individual and changing their heart and mind by your connection is effective, because that is light. And light spreads. Light is contagious, and it is a healing contagion. But just trying to take out and separate yourself and blame and shame someone, a single person, that is not effective, and it's not aligned with your cause. And I have to say again that it is an ineffective argument, and it's operating on a flawed premise. Like I was giving the example of the two sides of the abortion issue. Their arguments are flawed because they aren't respecting each other's premise or each other's perspective. And when we are working from a flawed premise, so when I say that, I mean that when a vegan says meat is murder, they are saying that to people who do not believe that. And if the vegan actually wants to convince someone that consuming suffering is harmful to themselves and to the unit, to everyone, and that that an animal is experiencing pain and is deeply conscious and deeply sentient, that is at the heart of what they want to do. But they're not communicating that with their flawed premise of meat is murder. Meat is murder is flawed, and when there is a flaw, then your cause, your argument, your discussion will never be successful because of that flaw. And so I want to just talk a little bit more about why that is a flawed premise. And that is because in order to, this is what I'm going to reference Patrick here again, Patrick Hayes' video on vegan fundamentalism, because he had a really great point when he said that when we actually when we grow and thereafter harvest a plant, there is destruction of animal life happening. Yeah, Jarvis is putting up video of Patrick's little video example here silently. And he pointed out that there are insects and microorganisms that are killed in the harvesting of plants. He further pointed out that if you are to grow a garden or a crop, that you're at some point going to have to use pesticides, whether they are, even if they are natural. And those pesticides could kill or at least starve out rodents, insects. And you see, so there is no way to avoid life when we are, avoid the ceasing of life when we are consuming. And as I already pointed out, plants are, I want to say my opinion, but it's not even my opinion. You could look at it from science and also from the fact that I have communicated with plants and they have deep consciousness and sentience. By the way, so do minerals and so do trees. And you're just going to have to take my, in order for us to move forward in this discussion, I'm going to ask you to just go ahead and take my experience as something that you can look at for yourself. But there are a lot of perspectives that will offer that as accurate. That plants, trees, rocks, everything has consciousness and sentience. Deepak Chopra says that where there is energy, there is information. Well, information is akin to consciousness. So when we consume a plant, we are consuming a sentient consciousness. And I was shown by Spirit as I was trying to decipher what diet I should have. And by the way, it's private, but I'll tell you that it's 99% what a lot of people call vegan. And what I do consume that is animal product is actually entirely cruelty-free, or I don't eat it. That's just true. But that goes to the vegetables as well. The vegetables that I consume are entirely cruelty-free. And I'm only asserting that in case there is a vegan who's listening who is angry and thinks that I'm just addicted to a system. I'm really doing my best and observing all of the parts of what I'm consuming to try to make it clean. But another way that we can make it clean is by deepening our consciousness about it. So if you are consuming a plant and you are understanding that this is, maybe this is new to you, that a plant actually feels pain and that a plant is conscious and sentient, that it isn't meant that you should be, if you feel like guilty about it, what that's actually asking you to do is to deepen your appreciation of it and to bless it. I said recently when I was on Facebook Live that I actually feel a little bit guilty when I throw out vegetables that are, rotten, or, what I mean, like I didn't actually consume them in the way that I intended to. But I don't stay with the guilt. I actually move a little deeper into it. And I pay thanks to them. I recognize the abundance that was given to me. And then I release it with the knowing that it will be consumed by Gaia. It will be consumed by microorganisms. It's still going to be composted, and it's still going to be changed. And so I release it in that deepened awareness. And that's what I actually want to point out, is that that's how we consume clean energy, is that what we consume, we pay deep gratitude to it, and we bless it. We bless it and we thank it for what we are receiving. One day I had this interesting synchronicity happen to me 3 times in one day. And on the 3rd time, something really powerful happened. And that was, so the synchronicity was, I had a dream about a particular sound. And it was like this buzzing, almost electronic sound. And it was making this certain pattern. And then part of the way through that same day, I heard that sound in my kitchen. And it surprised me. I recognized it. And so I went to go see where it was. And it was actually, I found my cats hearing it too, but on another side of the house. And so I went and followed the sound, but I also followed my cats. I went out into the next room, and then finally outside to my front porch. So my front porch is way, way on the other side of the house than my kitchen. I believe the sound was being picked up by some kind of vent and deposited into the kitchen, but I can't be certain of that. And so what it was a little hissing beetle, but I'd had a dream about this sound, and that's why it alerted me. A little hissing beetle, and he was sitting on my porch, and he was hissing, making this really bzz, 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 crazy loud sound. And so I was like, well, this beetle is here. I love beetles, by the way, and he has a message for me. I'll ask him if he has a message for me. And so I was connecting with him, clairsentiently, telepathically. And he was deeply wise, very, very old soul, and was giving me a perspective about unity and universality. And as we were having this exchange, a little mockingbird flew up and sat on the wall right by where we were. And the mockingbird, because I was in that shared signal, I could perceive the mockingbird saying, I'm going to get that, and I'm going to take it to my family. I'm going to get that bug, that beetle, and I'm going to go feed my family with it. And the mockingbird started to flap his wings in a stimulated way. And so, of course, because now I've connected with this beetle, like I said, as we do when something is similar to us, now we've communicated on spirit. And so now we are of kindred spirit, much like a mammal is kindred to us in the way that they respond and the way that they behave. We have a kindred spirit going on now. We have this connection. And so I thought, I must save this beetle from the mockingbird. And I felt the beetle say very distinctly, please do not take this away from me. I have lived a life, and this is the reward, is that I get to participate in moving forward in this energetic exchange, giving my energy over so that life can be lived on with this bird and his family. He said, this is my reward. This is my achievement. Please allow it to happen. And so I closed the door. And because I still didn't want to see it. I'm still, that sensitivity is still something to honor, and that's okay. That's okay. So, one other thing, as I said, I was listening to Spirit and saying, what diet should I have? What diet should I have? And I was shown in my vision a salmon swimming upstream, as they do, to spawn. And I was shown a bear picking up the salmon as they can and, biting the head off of the salmon. That's actually the fastest way and the most humane way. Interesting that a bear is more humane when the root of that is human. and consumed the salmon. And then I was shown that a human comes along and baits and catches the salmon and then consumes the salmon. And then I was asked, so what happens if neither one of these consumptions happen, if the human doesn't take the salmon, if the bear doesn't take the salmon? Well, then the salmon dies of old age or whatever it does. It falls down into the bed of the water, it falls to the waterbed, and then it's consumed by other creatures, and it's consumed by the soil, and it's consumed by Gaia who composts and transmutes it. So no matter what, energy is consumed and energy is used. And so the distinction here is be like the bear and be like the microorganisms and the other organisms who would consume the salmon, but be like the bear when you're consuming your plants as well. The other thing that I think is really dangerous about saying that meat is murder is because now we are casting that same indictment upon other animals. Is the bear a murderer? Well, if not, then what is the separation there? Are you then calling the bear less conscious than you, less aware? That's dangerous. The other thing that is dangerous is that having the separation with animals, if that is the heart that you have, having the separation and seeing them as not as conscious actually disempowers your relationship with them. It doesn't disempower the animal, but it does disempower your relationship and your ability to partner with them, which is how, again, this is how hearts and minds will be changed. You see, if we always are casting them as lesser, or we're always thinking of them as being victims, then that's a disempowerment of the relationship. If you were a person in a relationship, a partnership, and you were a person who had been victimized in your past, but your partner only saw you as a victim and continued to see you as a victim and didn't really see you able to move past that label, wouldn't that feel like your relationship couldn't be that empowered or that connected if you were constantly seen as a victim? So see them as champions and heroes for being able to take on, if it is suffering, and then show it to us. And rather than seeing them as martyrs, see them as champions. See them as beings who are willing to take on that challenge and show it to us in a way that is serious. Don't look away. Deepen your understanding of it. Deepen your appreciation of it so that you can, and then take that appreciation to the heart of someone who doesn't understand that yet. And appeal in compassion. Appeal in love. This is the way that we actually ascend together. And so how do we ascend? How do we consume clean energy? Of any kind, whether it's animal product or plant. It is because again, when we consume plants, as Patrick points out, we are consuming the life of other animals as well, at least, secondarily. Then we have to understand, we deepen our awareness about it and our appreciation, our gratitude, and we bless it. Blessing is an energy healing method. Blessing isn't something that belongs to the church, by the way. It doesn't belong to religion. Blessing is something that we do. It is an energy. It is like namaste. The light in me recognizes the light in you. That is a blessing. That is a connective, energetic action, I would say. So do bless it. And bless and redeem by your blessing. Understand that your sovereign space, that your creator energy is capable of healing whatever that came through, whatever that plant came through, in order to be able to be there for you and to give you life. Whatever that beetle came through, and however his life is going to be taken into that of the mockingbird, bless it. By the way, these more ascended consciousnesses, which animals in nature tend to, because they are closer to Gaia energy, which is closer to source energy in its signature, they actually do understand how to remove themselves from suffering of the body. The consciousness, the higher self, can do that, can dismiss it. They don't do it always, but it is the choice of the being to be able to experience that suffering or not. And that's because of just the desire to be able to have experienced it and to experience all that this 3D incarnated expression has to offer. One last thing I want to talk about, as I'm almost out of time here, and I didn't take any calls. I didn't even offer it because I just felt Spirit said there's some things that we need to talk about. This is a two-parter, though, so if you have a strong opinion or a question that's very sensitive, I welcome you to check in with me on the second part of this topic, because I do want to talk to people about it, and I want to hear what you have to say, and if you have what your questions would be, because that's just everything to me. So one last thing I want to say, and this doesn't have it entirely to do with veganism. This has to do with animal rights activists. It's a somewhat of a smaller issue, but it's very important and impactful. And that is when someone is feeling the activism about taking care of animals who are either poached or somehow abused and killed. And that is just the simple act of, again, going about it from the perspective of blame and shame. And in particular, putting up the pictures of and the bringing forward the pain as the argument. You see, you know that phrase, preaching to the choir? Well, what you do when you put up the picture of the lion who was, or actually, no, it was a tiger. I try to put it out of my remembrance as much as possible. Not because I want to forget what happened to the tiger, but because of the trauma that was spread by the imagery of it. When you put up the image of that tiger who was brutalized callously and carelessly, all you're doing is taking the choir out. You're not even preaching to the choir. The choir now takes to their bed because they have been traumatized and they are sad and they do not know how to make this world a better place anymore. Again, would you, if that were a child who had been brutalized, would you put up that picture? Why not? Why don't we put up pictures of children who have been brutalized? That's because we feel that it's disrespectful. Now, whether or not it's disrespectful and whether or not the animal actually cares from the side of spirit, whether their body is displayed, that's different. But the fact that we wouldn't do that to a human, put up that picture, but we are doing that with animals, that's something that needs to be looked at. That's a kind of disconnection. And I just want to bring that forward, that isn't the way. The shame and the blame is not the fully integrated way to do it. It is not being in creator energy. When we are in blame and shame, we are not in creator energy yet. We are not in the manifestation process yet. We are below it, in a place that wants us to go deep within and heal some things. And we are not yet up in the plane of manifestation. It's okay. It's human. We get there all the time. We get into blame, shame, regret. But that is asking us to pay attention to it, not to hold that place, but to ask it for its message and as quickly as possible move from it into the place of awareness and into the place of compassion and deeply loving your brother and sister, whether they be another human who has a different diet than you, whether they be a human who doesn't understand that it is painful and injurious to harm an animal, or whether it is an entire industry that is wreaking havoc on our bodies and on our planet. The only way that we actually move forward in this is to deepen our compassion and our awareness about it. And so I ask you to join me in that. And I'm going to talk about this more next week on Earth Day. So again, I would ask you to go and visit my Patreon page, because I want to engage with you guys face to face. And that is patreon.com/Tricia Carr. And come back next week. We'll be talking more about this, and I welcome your phone calls on this if you want to join me live. You can join me live by watching at 11 a.m. Pacific, either on any of my social media outlets, which you can find by at Tricia Carr Charm, or you can go to ubnradio.com/channel1, and that's where we broadcast as well. I would love to talk to you guys about this, okay? Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.